Ashraf Gada.
Coming up shortly, we'll talk about a hugely symbolic and historic mosque in Cairo, in Egypt, right? But let me tell you about Sentio Capital. Now, Sentio's invest for good philosophy is based on a genuine desire to use their investments and their investment skills, that is, for the benefit of broader society, while also delivering superior returns for clients, regardless of market conditions. You can visit their website, sentiocapital.com, or for more information on their Sharia investment products, right? Central Capital, invest for good. Central Capital Management is an authorized financial services provider. Okay, let's talk, let's do some champion spotting. Let me remind you, the project I drive is called Champion South Africa. We want to build South Africa into a champion nation. How do we do that? First step, we identify people who are champions. And on the other hand, we look at others and how we can capacitate them to become champions, because the ethos of what we do is really, we need to build the champions that will build the champion nation. So my role then is to do some champion spotting. And we've chatted before, of course, but continuously so. I can't ignore the achievements of Dr. Shakira Choonara. So yeah, Shakira, once again, I'm champion spotting and I've sort of spotted you out. Good morning and salam alaikum.
Salam, Ashraf. It's wonderful to check in with you and the listeners again.
Thank you. Now, I mean, you've done many things, and we'll maybe chat about that in the 10 minutes or so we have. But I mean, just the latest part, because I think it's a signpost, right? I mean, I sort of spotted you with pictures with the WHO head, Dr. Tedros. Now, it doesn't just happen by chance. I mean, I don't have attendance with him, right? And that perhaps as someone from South Africa, from Johannesburg, in fact, from Roodepoort, from Lappies, if I'm not mistaken, that township or that community people would know, right? Who's done remarkable things since then. I mean, that is champion like, and I wanted to just reflect on where you are now and how you got there. So let's start with that. Let's talk about the WHO conversations you've been having and where you've been just recently.
Yeah, sure, Ashraf. And I think I was laughing as I was walking to the headquarters in Geneva over the past 2 weeks. I was there for the Global Forum on Human Resources for Health. And I've actually been with the World Health Organization for 3 years now, working across 2 departments. And it's really hugely exciting. And I actually pinch myself as I go to the office every day, and you think, is this really the place you're working at, one? But two, it's also the sort of impact that you're having. And so on the one program that I support, it's known as Working for Health. It's a global program which supports countries in terms of human resources for health. And we know that we have a dire situation when it comes to health workers in the healthcare system, etc. And last year, I was part of a team that passed the resolution at the World Health Assembly for the Working for Health program. And this will guide countries across the world between now and 2030. So that's a big pinch moment. And then, yes, there has been the picture doing its rounds on social media with myself and Dr. Tedros. And, I have great respect, and it's not often that I just say that about anyone, but I have great respect for Dr. Tedros. I had managed to bump into him last week. I actually knew him as a young person before he became Director General of the WHO. And there's one thing that stands out for me in terms of Dr. Tedros compared to several other, high-level people that I've met over my career. There's very little bureaucracy. He actually remembers your name. He's very responsive. And he's extremely, extremely humble. But as I met him last week, there was something I said to him. I said, Dr. Tedros, you're taking a big risk speaking out against the conflict in Tigray in Ethiopia. Not many people in your position will do this. And he's actually, he actually faced the risk of not being re-elected to the WHO head because of his stance on human rights. And so we had a conversation a little bit about that. But in sum, I have great respect for him. He reminds me a lot of Ahmed Kathrada and others who just had that humility and that ability to engage with people irrespective of their level within the organization or across the world, their sort of position in global health.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, and he's Ethiopian himself. I mean, so that's that point there, right? How did you get to work for the WHO? And are you based in South Africa or are you in Geneva?
Well, I'm a remote worker, so I live and work all across the world, supporting different programs across different countries as well. It was quite a process as well. I think one thing that made me probably stand out compared to others in my field was being quite young and having a PhD, of course. But of course, I've also been quite an activist and working in the sexual and reproductive health space and the HIV space. I'd actually facilitated so many meetings. I've never been a person to shy away from saying what needs to be said and how to build systems and how to do things. It's quite exciting. As an activist, I never thought I'll be sitting in a multilateral system. The other day, someone had called me a bureaucrat. But what I do, I'm really thriving. I'm really enjoying it. And so my work and my activism, both writing, speaking, working with young people and communities, had got me recognized to work on what we know as the WHO and UNFPA Sexual and Reproductive Health and Universal Health Coverage Portal. So it's a portal that sort of brings stories from across the world on how to advance the rights of women and girls' health.
Yeah, and interesting. I want to pick up on that the bureaucrat part, because you made the point about Dr. Tedros, cutting out bureaucracy, and you get sort of accused of being this bureaucrat. How did you answer that question, or that comment rather, about you?
Well, it wasn't so much an accusation. A really good friend of mine has said,
Yeah.
Shakira, you're now sitting in the UN system and you're now a bureaucrat. And I have to say I was quite shocked because I never really thought about it in that way. But I think the one thing I try and do, Ashraf, is in whatever space I'm in, I try not to get wrapped up in a system. I try not to get wrapped up in red tape, for example. I think it's really important to hold yourself accountable. So maybe I would be classified to the outside world as a bureaucrat, but internally, I think myself as well, it's always pushing boundaries. It's always sort of bringing a fresh perspective to things and not conforming. I personally don't like the term bureaucrat. So when I was sort of classified in that way, it made me quite worried. And so I think it's going to get me to be even more activisty versus more bureaucratic.
And look, I mean, without spending time on this, because I mean that's not the plan, right? But some may say, the United Nations needs reform, the WHO needs reform, the IMF needs reform, and so on and so on. Okay, and some may say, dismantle them. Others may say, well, you need to be a part of it, and then you can reform from within. Now, no, I'm not expecting a 5-minute conversation about that, not at all. But do you see yourself therefore also as this bureaucrat from the outside, but in fact the activist within, which allows you to reform at a level where you can make the most immediate impact versus doing it, say, picketing on the streets?
Absolutely. So I think, impact happens at different levels. You can have impact at the community level. You can have impact at your government level. You can try and have impact at the African Union level, which I try to serve in. Or you can have your impact at a global level, such as WHO. And the World Health Organization actually celebrates its 75th anniversary. And when you just look at the timeline of of course, there's pros and cons, there's weaknesses, there's strengths. But what we see WHO has achieved from 1948 until now, it's the guidance documents that people are using in the workplaces, that healthcare workers are using in hospitals. Like I mentioned, the Working for Health Action Plan, which is adopted. Over the 75-year period, there's been strengths in antibiotic resistance, in polio eradication, in the Ebola response. So there's so many wins of WHO. And so I think that, this has an important point or an important sort of impact in global health, and it plays an important role. And so for me, the impact will not necessarily hit communities immediately, but it shall be there. The impact is at global level guidance, bringing together the world on this vision for global health.
Absolutely. It does get me thinking about, growing up in rural poority. I mean, what was your plan? I mean, like, you had a dream, and that dream was what? Was it this?
This dream wasn't really to be within the World Health Organization. And I said it a few times. Growing up, I always felt passionate about South Africa, and I still do. And so it was really to be either the Minister of Health and eventually the President of South Africa. But, as many of us know, life is not clear cut, and you don't just follow that path. For now, I'm in a path of being within the World Health Organization. As I mentioned, I absolutely enjoy it and I thrive, for example. But at the back of my mind, something I'm really keen to do is to uplift the community in Rudaput, because I don't want to pass there in 10 years' time and someone says, I'm from there and look at how that community still looks. So I'm struggling with a few things at the moment, but I really want to also push community level projects and help build South Africa. I mean, I think we're all at a point in our country where we're feeling very demotivated, myself included. But I think it's always about sitting back and saying, running away is possibly not the solution, but how do we stay behind and try and build things and make a better place?
Absolutely. Basically, what do you do? What do you use your privilege? And I mean that privilege, earned or whatever has come to you, and it's a privilege you need to use. But I mean, talking about the Rudaport example, I mean, you're right, and I'll just draw on the champion South Africa point, and this is something we need to talk deeper about. Is like we need to build champion communities. It's one thing wanting to build a champion nation, but it can never start right at the top. It has to start at grassroots, isn't it? I mean, do you think not enough effort is made and in almost ring fencing communities? Let's say yours is one, but I can think of 1,000 like that, and effectively turning those communities around one by one.
Well, one, I don't want to shy away from the fact that government needs to deliver services and they've failed on this front, right? So they still have that responsibility to us. And us as citizens standing up should not take anything away from them. But what we're also finding in South Africa is it's very unlikely for government to solve our issues, to solve the litter outside, to solve the potholes. And so is it about time that us as communities get together? Because, essentially, I was driving around the other day, I visit my mom quite often, and I thought to myself, people have such beautiful houses on the inside, but your outside is full of litter, full of potholes, full of crime, etc. And so the question is, what are you doing about it? And I think what's missing in the fabric of our South African society, not all communities, we find pockets of communities, but what's missing is that solidarity of, let's build the place that we're living in together. Let's not just run away from this place or forget about this place.
Yeah, good point. We've got about 2 minutes. Just a quick thought on you've received many accolades and let's call it recognition or awards. I mean, I'm gonna indulge you maybe just to give me like 5 bullet points of some of them.
There's been so many. So, I mean, I picked up a photo the other day. I was once a Golden Key leader up in university. The three big ones for me, which stood out, which meant a lot to me, was winning the National Research Foundation Young Female Researcher of the Year a couple of years ago, the Woman of the Year in Health in South Africa, 100 most influential Africans. That's still pretty wow. And the one I still pinch myself about is being Destiny Magazine's most powerful woman under 40.
I certainly remember that. It's like, wow, can you believe this? It's quite incredible. I mean, it does leave me with this question, right? How important has that recognition been for you? Because I'm saying that because there could be many others like you who don't get that recognition. How important has it been for you? How important has it been in then building further stepping stones to your career beyond that? And therefore, how important has it then helped you to make even a greater impact?
I think if there's one thing that us as women, and many women can correct me on this, but if there's one thing we tend to struggle with because of the societies we live in and the way society is shaped, is self-confidence. But also, I had worked in a couple of toxic work environments, which really dampened my spirit as a young person, to make me think that I couldn't write. I wasn't on the right path, etc., etc. When I would tell people my dream of being the president of South Africa, I'd get hordes of laughter. But I think what these awards gave me, one, is on a personal level, self-confidence to dream, to be big. And two, it also allowed me, and I think Ashraf was on your show many years ago when you asked me, now that you have this award, what will you do? And that question is something I actually keep in the back of my mind every single day, is what will I do with this? And last year I launched a scholarship program, and I've committed that every year I will support one young woman on the African continent to finish her studies. And so that award, for example, has led to one, self-confidence and leadership abilities, but two, that bolster to give back to society.
Well, there you are. What will I do? What will I do? It's something that I think everybody watching us like, true. What about them? What would I do? How do I get inspired by Dr. Shakira Choonara? Just one last thing, and I speak often about South Africa's position in the world, right? So two quick thoughts in a minute. What's your personal purpose, and what do you think the national purpose ought to be?
Well, my personal purpose is definitely the right to better healthcare and non discrimination. I feel very strongly about that. What's South Africa's responsibility? I think we're looking a lot internally at what's happening ourselves, etc. But we play such a big part on the African continent, from the provision of services, that the demise of South African Airways. We also need to think about our role within the African continent, specifically, and what our downfall means for the people of Africa. So I think that's something to put on the champion radar.
Well, absolutely, you're right. A failing South Africa fails the continent. We cannot do that indeed. So let's hopefully talk one day when we can glow about the fact that, hey, you know what? South Africa truly is a champion nation. Not today. It may happen sometime down the line. But if you don't think it as you've done, it will never happen. We need to think it in the first place. Shakira, from your point of view, it's always been a privilege talking to you, and you know that. And as part of this feature where we do some champion spotting, or I do some champion spotting, I'll remind you once again, well, you've been spotted. There we are, Dr. Shakira Choonara. She's certainly been spotted. Fascinating. I tell you what, there's so much she didn't say. Go and Google her story. Believe me, it is incredibly inspiring. And you know what? She comes from your community. Think about that. Let's talk about a mosque with a great legacy in Cairo, in Egypt, right after this.